In this video, we will understand what the United States debt ceiling is, why it is important, and how it affects you. So basically what happened is that the US government has a big problem that they have to solve before June 1st. They cannot avoid this problem. They have to somehow solve it, and that too before June 1st. And what is that problem? It is related to the US economy. United States is going to default on its debt at the end of this month if the US government fails to reach a new agreement. What do I mean by all of this? Let me explain in the simplest way possible. We all know that every country in this world has national debt. National debt is also known as public debt. It is the total amount of money that a government owes to its creditors, including individuals, institutions, and foreign governments. A country's national debt represents the accumulated borrowing over time to finance government expenditures that exceed revenue generated through taxes and other sources. So every country in this world has some national debt. But the United States of America has the highest national debt, which is currently, that is in 2023, is around $31.46 trillion. Here is the list of top 15 countries whose debt is very high. Although this data is from 2018, but you will get some idea. So the point is, the United States is the country with the highest national debt, which is $31.46 trillion. Now, if I have to tell you in the simplest manner, although this would be an oversimplified statement, but let me still say it. We can say that all the development that we see in United States is largely because of its debt, because debt has played an important role in United States growth and development. Debt has been used by the US government to finance infrastructure projects, fund public services, support economic stimulus measures, and invest in education and research, and there are plenty of other things. Now this statement is true for every country. It is not limited to United States. But then this video is about United States, so I'm telling this in context of United States. Therefore, it is very important for any country to assess its policies with respect to development and debt. Because the fact of the matter is, everybody wants to develop, but then development comes with a cost. A debt of a country is typically passed on to future generations. When a government incurs debt, it essentially borrows money that will need to be repaid with interest over a specified period. Suppose if the debt is not fully repaid during the current generation's time, the responsibility to repay the remaining debt falls on future generations. It is plain and simple. That is why I always say that every country needs to develop at its own pace. Just looking at another country, you cannot rush with your development idea. If you study the economy of Japan, it is a perfect case study that will tell you that Japan's desire for rapid development and economic growth has played a significant role in its high national debt. So now that you have understood United States has the highest national debt in the world, now what happened is that this year in January, the United States has reached its debt ceiling. Reaching the debt ceiling refers to a situation when a country's government has reached the maximum amount of debt it is legally allowed to borrow. Basically, a debt ceiling is a limit set by legislation that determines the maximum level of debt a government can incur. Otherwise, if there is no such legislation, then the government of a country will not have any limit on borrowing, and that can make the entire country go bankrupt. Similar to what is happening to Pakistan right now. As you know, every 4 years, a newly elected government has the authority to govern the United States of America and raise funds within a certain limit to implement its schemes and policies. Therefore, the United States debt ceiling is a legislative limit that determines how much debt the US Treasury Department may incur. So this year on January 19th, the Biden government has reached that debt ceiling. In simple words, the Biden government has spent more than what it has earned. Basically, the government expenditure is more than the government earnings. Now suppose if a government consistently spends more money than it generates in revenue, then it may need to borrow or cover the deficit. Now over time, this accumulation of debt can approach or even breach the predetermined debt ceiling set by legislation. Now, how did this happen? If you look at the debt ceiling legislation, it was introduced by the US Congress in 1917. That means in the past 100 years, anyone who comes into power, that is the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, they have routinely increased the debt ceiling through Congress. Because whenever the US Treasury Department could no longer pay the government bills, Congress had to act quickly and increase the limit. Now here is a graph that will show you that the United States debt has many times gone up faster than the debt ceiling. Therefore, this clearly tells us that the US government is constantly borrowing money with absolutely no regard for what it can possibly lead to. Then this year in Jan 2023, again the US national debt reached the debt ceiling. And this time it was under the presidency of Joe Biden. You have to go back to last year, which is in 2022, when this Russia-Ukraine conflict started. And the United States government, which is Joe Biden's government, the Democratic Party, they were spending money like water, giving aid and military equipment to Ukraine. Almost $80 billion was spent on Ukraine. This is BBC's report. There are other reports that suggest till now the United States has allocated nearly $150 billion in support of Ukraine. Whatever may be the right figure, but the point is this kind of excessive and unnecessary spending, then printing money whenever they want, and this way of rapidly reaching the debt ceiling limit will lead to increased borrowing costs for businesses and homeowners, and that will lead to drop in consumer confidence that could shock the US financial market and tip the economy into recession. And then ultimately, if the US economy, that is the US dollar, goes into recession, it will create havoc on global financial markets. That is why many countries are promoting de-dollarization, meaning many countries are substituting the US dollar as the currency used for trading oil and other commodities.